Hey, thank you. And we're going to kick off the remarks at 11:15. So we're going to let people. That's what Nancy tells me. So doors open at 11. Opening remarks. All right, good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me okay? All right, how about in the sound room? You got the sound going okay? All right, well, thank you very much, Frankie. I want to thank Frankie for making this possible. We're also live streaming on the District Attorney's YouTube channel. We don't do that often, but we wanted to make sure that everyone in the community had a chance to participate and hear about the amazing work that many of our partners in our Christopher G. Money Victim Witness Assistance Center does each and every day here in our community for sadly too many victims of crime that we have here. But it's an honor to have you here with us as we recognize April 2026 as Crime Victims' Rights Awareness Month. And I want to thank the Board of Supervisors for making that declaration just a week or two ago. And I want to thank all of you who gathered this morning, to our victim advocates, our law enforcement partners, our community organizations, and most importantly to the survivors and victims who remind us every day why this work matters. I want to begin this morning with a simple observation and a challenge for each of you. We have long called what we do the criminal justice system. Years ago, one of my staff, named Nancy, was trying to console a frustrated victim, and she said, it's not called the victim justice system, it's called the criminal justice system. That statement, when Nancy told me about that, was a sad but painful reality. But I refuse to accept that as a permanent one. So I'm asking everyone here in this room to join me in our office in changing the words that we describe the system. Instead of criminal justice system, the criminal and victim justice system. That one connector word "and" is so important because it will help to remind the legislators, the executives, various agencies, community boards, and organizations, anytime that they're dealing with the justice system, that every change that they make not only affects the offender, the criminal offender, but it affects every single victim. The people of California have spoken loudly on this subject. It was in 1982 that we first passed Proposition 8, which created the very first statutory and constitutional rights for crime victims. But over the following years, we had not kept up that promise, and it became clear that those protections were not enough. So on November 4th, 2008, Californians passed Proposition 9, which was generically called Marsy's Law, which created 17 enumerated constitutional rights for crime victims and declared that this law was needed, in the words on the proposition, to remedy a justice system that fails to fully recognize and adequately enforce the rights of victims of crime. So that mandate from the people of California is now written into the California Constitution, Article 1, Section 28. It has not changed, and we have a solemn obligation to honor it. Yet we really need to be honest with ourselves that there's still a great deal of hard work ahead of us. Victims continue to tell us, and I know from talking with our community partners, telling them that they still feel often overlooked by a system that seems more focused on offenders than on those who were harmed. Not to minimize the importance of offenders in our justice system, but that focus on them should not be at the expense of forgetting about the victims. The dignity of victims as individuals, their right to be present in court, their right to be heard, their right to be informed about the process happening and to have it explained to them is too often an afterthought rather than a priority. But I'm proud of our office and our long commitment to providing rights under Marsy's Law to every victim of crime. This law gave us the tools and the constitutional mandate to fight it, and fight it we must. But meanwhile, in Sacramento, we've watched in recent years as reform after reform has been enacted with very little regard for the effect on crime victims, beginning with AB 109, Propositions 47 and 57. We were promised smarter and more humane outcomes, but sadly, oftentimes we've seen weakened accountability, broken promises to victims when sentences were imposed and dangerous offenders returned to communities. We've seen recently a convicted, able-bodied serial child molester who admitted at his own parole hearing that he's still attracted to young children. He was granted early release under California's elder parole provision. That provision was sold to us in California as a compassionate care for the frail and dying. And in that instance, I think we'd all agree that some cases would warrant early release due to illness and, like cancer and things like that, causing them to not be able to be cared for well. But this was an able-bodied gentleman, only 64 years old. And in my opinion, and what I've read with comments from all over the state of California, that it felt like a betrayal of those victims and, frankly, other victims across California who trust this system to protect them. But the good news is that the people of California are ahead of their elected officials. In 2024, 70% of Californian voters passed Proposition 36, which sent an unmistakable message that accountability and victim-centered justice matters. That is the spirit that must guide us going forward. So here in San Luis Obispo County, we have tried to answer that call every day. Last year alone, our office received nearly 12,000 criminal cases. That's misdemeanors and felonies, no infractions included in that. Of those 12,000, our victim advocates served approximately 10,000 individual victims of crime. Those crimes range from domestic violence, sexual assault, to homicide, child abuse, DUI, and theft. And each of those nearly 10,000 people represents a life disrupted, a family shaken, a human being who deserves to be seen and supported. And that brings me to something that fills me with great pride in our office, that this year we mark the 49th anniversary of the beginning of the Christopher G. Money Victim Witness Assistance Center. It was in 1977 that San Luis Obispo County, along with Alameda County, we were one of only these two counties to begin a victim assistance center in all of California. Since then, all 58 counties have some sort of victim assistance program. But this is a testament, our success is a testament to the vision and the compassion of former District Attorney Christopher G. Money. So in 2017, we dedicated our center in his name. He had passed away after serving on the bench as a Superior Court judge, very highly respected in our community for many years, as well as he had been a Vietnam War veteran. And his legacy has only grown stronger with each passing year. So 49 years of walking alongside of victims, 49 years of saying, you will not be forgotten, you will be seen, and you will have a voice in the criminal and victim justice system. So I want to close with an invitation for 12 months from now. We are now going to begin planning a big 50th anniversary event. It'll be much larger than what can fit in this room. It might be out on the courthouse steps like we have done before. But we encourage all of our partners to begin now talking with Jessica Yates, the director of our Victim Witness Assistance Center, and our team, because we want it to be a really amazing event to really celebrate that hard work and that milestone of 50 years. And to celebrate all of the advocates from its very beginning until today that have served our community. So with that, I'm going to turn this over in a moment to our law enforcement partner. You might recognize that over the recent years, we have highlighted a law enforcement partner and also a community agency. So today we have, we're honored to have Chief Watkins from Morro Bay Police Department. We also have two individuals from CASA, Court-Appointed Special Advocates, and you're going to get to hear about the great work that they do. And for those of you that hear the great need that we have for more adult mentors, what we call CASAs in our community, I hope that some of you will answer the call and say, I want to learn more, I want to talk to Marina afterwards, and perhaps volunteer. We need quite a few more CASAs to make sure all of the children in our community who are dealing with a loved one going through the justice system, that they have the support that they need. And finally, all of us together are committed to this work, because justice is truly not achieved until the victim and the survivor has been included. So now I want to introduce Chief Amy Watkins. Chief Watkins began her law enforcement career in January of 2000 with the Visalia Police Department. And during her almost 20-year career with Visalia, she worked an array of assignments. Her most fulfilling assignment was as a violent crimes detective, and later she was the investigation sergeant. As a violent crimes detective and sergeant, she was assigned to solve hundreds of criminal cases where she was able to bring peace and closure to hundreds of victims and their families of violent crimes. Chief Watkins moved to Morro Bay in August of 2019 to serve as the police department commander. She led the police operations through the COVID pandemic and racial unrest. The focus and the commitment of the department never wavered from serving in partnership with the community in advocating for victims of crime. Chief Watkins has earned the strong respect of all of her peers, the other chiefs across the county, and the sheriff and the DA. She continues to lead the men and women of the Morro Bay Police Department with the values and vision to raise the standard of policing each day, to focus on service and policing through partnerships. And throughout Amy's career, she's been a strong advocate for victims' rights and supporting victims as they navigate through the judicial process. So, Chief Watkins, thank you for being here today.
Good morning. Don't worry, Dan, it's okay. You got me a year early, so I'll reopen my calendar for the 50th. So we got you. We got you. Good morning. When crime occurs, there are two stories. One is about the person who committed the act. The other is about the person who suffered because of it. As peace officers, we experience the event with the victims in real time. Whether it is responding to active scenes or receiving an emotional statement in the aftermath, peace officers represent the beginning of a healing process. This is also where officers begin to advocate for the victims' rights. Peace officers will often guide victims along a path through the justice system. We walk next to those who are strong and resilient, and we walk next to those who are struggling and in need of strength and support. In my career as a peace officer and for many years as a violent crime detective, I have walked with and advocated for victims of crime. I have seen the devastation of crime and what it takes for victims and survivors to fight for justice, to gain closure in hopes of attaining peace. Historically, our justice system has focused primarily on offenders, their rights, their trials, their rehabilitation. And while those things matter, there has been a painful imbalance. Advocating for crime victims' rights is about correcting that imbalance. It is about recognizing that justice is not complete unless it includes dignity, support, and a voice for those who have been harmed. I have observed the fear and confusion victims often experience when judicial proceedings take place. Victims and their families put their faith in all of us to flawlessly navigate a very formal and confusing process. Failure is not an option, as failure in this arena has devastating effects on those we are sworn to protect. Imagine for a moment what it means to be a victim of crime. It can mean losing a loved one to violence. It can mean surviving abuse, assault, or exploitation. It can mean waking up every day with fear, anxiety, or grief that doesn't simply disappear when the trial ends. For many victims, the aftermath of crime is not a moment, it is a lifetime. I have witnessed the pain when victims have been left out of the process. They may not be informed about court proceedings. They may not have the opportunity to speak about how the crime affected their lives. They may struggle with access to counseling, financial assistance, or even basic information about their rights. This is why advocacy matters. Advocacy ensures that victims are seen, heard, and respected. It pushes for laws and policies that guarantee victims the right to be informed, the right to be present, and the right to be heard. It demands access to resources like counseling services, legal assistance, and financial compensation. And perhaps most importantly, it affirms that victims are not alone. I have been extremely fortunate to work alongside strong and caring victim witness assistance professionals. District Attorney Dan Dow, Director Jessica Yates, and Assistant Directors Beth Robb and Jennifer Love, and their team worked tirelessly to support and advocate for victims and their families. Progress has been made. Victims' rights movements have led to important changes. Victim impact statements, notification systems, and support services have become more common, but there is still work to do. In a perfect world, no one is a victim of crime, but our world is not perfect. The question I ask myself and our officers is what we can do to support victims of crime in the community. As a chief, I can be open to receiving feedback, recommendations, and thoughts about the victims in our community, their needs from their police department. I can work with local officials and legislators to advance the message of those victims so they can be heard on a larger scale. As peace officers, I believe we can be better allies for victims to help begin the healing and advocacy process. Make their voices louder. We must strive to be better at supporting our victims of crime while we relentlessly pursue the criminals responsible and bring them to justice. In our communities, many victims still face barriers. Language barriers, financial hardship, and fear of retaliation can prevent people from coming forward. In some cases, victims are re-traumatized by the very systems that are meant to help them. Long delays, confusing legal processes, and a lack of communication can deepen their pain. If we as peace officers cannot successfully overcome those barriers, our communities will never be safe and will only become more dangerous. Advocacy is about breaking down those barriers. Advocacy is continuing to support and showing up for our County Victim Witness Assistance Center. Advocacy is engaging with those who are struggling and helping them navigate difficult times. Advocacy is listening without judgment, offering support, sharing resources. These acts are simple, but to someone who feels overwhelmed or invisible, it can be everything. In Law Enforcement Code of Ethics, the code speaks about officers acting with no compromise for crime and with relentless prosecution of criminals. If we could add a sentence, I would add, true justice holds offenders accountable while also restoring a sense of safety, respect, and humanity to victims. When officers stand up for and stand up with victims, those actions demonstrate advocacy. Keeping open lines of communication throughout the judicial process proves to our victims that we are focused on them, their families, and their future. Victims deserve our very best. They deserve to be heard. They deserve to be supported. They most definitely deserve justice. I want to thank District Attorney Dan Dow and Victim Witness Assistance Center for the invitation to join you and speak with you all today. It's an honor to be here and an honor to be a part of this wonderful San Luis Obispo County law enforcement community. Thank you very much.
I think she was right. We brought her in a year early. That was amazing. And I just want to say thank you. And it makes me feel blessed to know that somebody really who has the victim's heart really at the forefront of your mind to be running the Morro Bay Police Department. So thank you for what you do and what you just said. And that's amazing. So thank you. And so now, later I'll say a few words, but I will be introducing our nonprofit partner. We bring one in each year. And if you guys didn't know, this month is the month of the child and Child Abuse Awareness Month. And so we have asked Miss Marina Bernheimer from CASA, Executive Director, to come speak today. And she also brought a CASA with her. We will be speaking. And I'll tell you a little bit about Miss Marina, who I've come to really enjoy working with over all these years. So Marina is the Executive Director of Court-Appointed Special Advocates, or CASA. Marina is deeply passionate about CASA's mission to provide critical support and advocacy to some of our community's most vulnerable children, victims of severe abuse and neglect, navigating the foster care system, which I know you all know is very difficult for those kids. Marina's current position reflects the accumulation of a 30-year career dedicated to supporting children and families, including farm workers, low-income families, and foster youth. Her path to this work began when she earned her master's degree in social work in 1994 with a concentration in child and family services, so we can definitely say that she's the subject matter expert. So without further ado, I introduce Miss Marina Bernheimer.
Thank you, Jessica. Good morning. I'm so pleased to be here today to honor Victim Rights Awareness and to share about the work that we do at CASA of San Luis Obispo. So CASA stands for Court Appointed Special Advocates, as Jessica stated, and CASA was started 50 years ago by a judge in Seattle who felt that he had insufficient information to make life-changing decision about a 3-year-old in the courtroom who had suffered severe abuse and neglect. The judge noted that the children in the courtroom who had experienced severe abuse or neglect needed someone to speak up for their interests in the courtroom. And although these kids have social workers and attorneys working with them, these people have large caseloads of clients and limited time to spend one-on-one with the children they serve and represent. So in response to that problem, the judge started training ordinary community members to advocate for the best interests of the children in court. The Seattle program was so successful that the idea spread. And today there are over 950 local CASA programs like the one in San Luis Obispo and over 750,000 volunteers working one-on-one with vulnerable kids in foster care. Here in San Luis Obispo, our CASA program's been doing this work for 30 years. So a CASA volunteer is a trained community member appointed by a judge while they navigate foster care. They visit the child regularly, spending time with them every week to really get to know the child's interests and the child's needs, investigate their circumstances, and report their findings to the judge to ensure that their needs are met and that they find a safe and permanent home. They provide consistent, supportive presence, spending time with them regularly, and making sure that the judges can make informed decisions about the child's placement, services, and well-being. They work with all of the stakeholders in a child's life, social workers, attorneys, teachers, foster parents, to make sure that the child receives court-ordered services like therapy or tutoring or medical services as needed. When a child has been abused or neglected by their parent, it leaves them with no single adult who's dedicated to ensuring their medical, educational, developmental, and personal needs are met. There's no one to assure follow-through and to make sure that the particular needs of the individual child are identified. This is why a child receives a CASA volunteer. And CASAs are volunteers by design. Although social workers and teachers and foster parents are hardworking and kind, they're all being paid to support a child. They're doing their job. A CASA is only there because they care about the child. And for a child old enough to understand this dynamic, that promotes a great sense of trust and caring that really helps build a trusting relationship. Today's Victim Rights Awareness Day promotes a really simple but powerful theme: listen, act, advocate. And CASA volunteers embody this theme perfectly. That's exactly what a CASA volunteer does. They're trained to listen, to truly hear a child's unique individual story and understand their needs and wishes. They act, making sure that their assigned child gets the services, support, and stability that they need. And they advocate. They advocate in courtrooms, in classrooms, and in systems that can feel incredibly overwhelming and confusing to a child, ensuring that that child's voice is not lost and they don't fall through the cracks of the system as they navigate foster care. I'm going to tell you about a little girl named Sierra. When Sierra was 14 years old, she was living in a nearby riverbed with her mom, who was a meth addict. Her mom sent her to live with an ex-boyfriend in a trailer nearby. He was also an addict, and a few days after moving in, Sierra found his body dead on the kitchen floor of an overdose. And it was in that moment that Sierra became another kid in the system, a foster care but through no fault of her own. And sadly, Sierra's story is not unique. There are hundreds of kids in San Luis Obispo County suffering similar stories. And for children who enter foster care, the future can be bleak. 40% become homeless after aging out of foster care. They're disproportionately vulnerable to human trafficking. Fewer than 40% graduate high school, and they suffer from rates of PTSD double that of combat veterans, unless they have a CASA. Because when a child has a CASA, everything changes. Children with a CASA are far less likely to become homeless or end up incarcerated. Compared with their peers, they receive more services, they spend on average 8 months fewer in foster care, they're more likely to find a permanent home, and they're more likely to succeed in school, to find stability, and to begin healing. When Sierra first met her CASA, she was angry. She was closed off and shut down. She was failing all of her classes. But slowly, week by week, conversation by conversation, her CASA gained her trust and allowed her to engage in services like therapy and tutoring. And slowly, Sierra began to trust her CASA and to engage in those services. And when Sierra beat the odds, graduating high school with all A's and B's, her CASA was in the audience cheering her across the stage, not as a professional obligation, but as someone who truly cared. This year, I'm really proud to share that 100% of the kids served by CASA graduated high school and enrolled in college. And 100% of the children that we serve find stable housing when they age out of foster care, beating the odds. 100%. And that doesn't happen by accident. It happens because someone showed up, someone listened, someone acted, and someone advocated. That's why we need CASA volunteers. And there's a question that researchers have asked for decades. What is that thing that allows some children to transcend childhoods of trauma and abuse, while others are stuck in cycles of addiction and violence and poverty? And the answer is resilience. And social science and data has also taught us that although it's complicated and there are many factors, the number one factor that promotes resilience in children is the presence of one consistent, caring adult in a child's life. Sometimes that's a teacher or a neighbor, and for us, it's a CASA. When we talk about victim rights, we have to remember that children are among the most vulnerable of all. They often don't have the words, the power, or the platform to speak for themselves. We are so grateful for our partnerships with the DA's office and the Victim Witness Center to help us ensure that victims of child abuse and neglect secure the benefits that they deserve and the compensation that they deserve in order to heal and move forward. Our partnership is really valuable and it's been long-standing. Thank you for learning about the work that we do at CASA and for supporting vulnerable victims of crime in San Luis Obispo. We couldn't do this alone, and we're grateful for your support. Thank you. And it is my pleasure to introduce to you Meribeth Middleton, who is a CASA volunteer, who's just going to take a few minutes to talk about her experience serving children in San Luis Obispo. Meribeth grew up in a small town in the Central Valley, and most of her work experience has been spent in early childhood education. She enjoys time with her family and recently became a first-time grandmother. Meribeth has been a CASA volunteer for just over 2 years and has advocated for 2 children during that time. So welcome, Meribeth.
Okay, so for the record, we did not cover our similar content prior to writing the speech, but very similar. So prior to becoming a CASA, my own children were grown and I had stepped away from working to support a family member who was ill. After that, I was at a point in life where time was not an excuse. I had continually seen advertising for CASA and I began to consider it. And I asked myself, if not me, who? So now I am just over 2 years in and on my second case. My first case, the kiddo was a 5-year-old boy. He was considered nonverbal. In that case, the cause of detainment was severe neglect due to addiction by the parents. The parents were a unit and were surprisingly open in interactions with me, as well as taking accountability for the situation their family was in. They were considered case compliant throughout the reunification process, in which resulted in a successful unification. Most of my time on that case was spent outside of time with the child, as he was receiving a lot of services. A big part of my advocacy for that child was additional speech therapy, getting a diagnosis of autism before the case closed, and attending his IEP meetings. I have been on my current case for a year now, and this case has been more complex. The child was 9, now a 10-year-old girl, 10 going on 15, and very verbal. There was a type of neglect involved, as she was parentified, so she was the caretaker for younger siblings, and was the only target of abuse by a parent. With this case, the parents are separated and have a lot of conflict with each other, which adds a layer to their situation. And taking them on 2 separate reunification paths. During this past year, this case has been very intense and full of challenges. Since the beginning of the reunification process, the kiddo has had a strong desire to be reunified with only one parent, the one who did not cause trauma to her. However, with the other parent, the reunification journey so far has been inconsistent, tense. The rebuilding process is strained and leaving a fractured relationship. There have been numerous calls from my kiddo to me when she has been in emotional distress, leading to trying to balance lots of emotions: hurt, disappointment, low self-worth, and all the while anger is acting as all those bodyguards. During which I am trying to help this child find and maintain some emotional stability and make sure to still respect the process. Recently, one of those calls came where she was in hysterics and was sharing some very concerning information, which I would describe as verbal and emotional abuse towards her. Yet again, this has left this child dysregulated, in distress, and now totally shut down with one parent, which has been a pattern reoccurring over and over, causing setbacks instead of progression. I read that words should be used as if planting seeds. Some will grow and some will never bloom. The intention should be to nurture, not to destroy. Their reunification process has stalled and hit a wall. Maybe reunification is not the right outcome between this parent and child. During times of uncertainty, I replay in my head a quote from my favorite football coach, Lou Holtz, where he said, and I repeat to myself, WIN, what's important now? Win, right? Going through the CASA training, I remember questioning to myself, will my report really make a difference in court? When I was sworn in, that judge said, oh, the CASA report is the first one I look for. And later, during a hearing with a different judge, this judge stated, I read the CASA report that kiddo has consistently said, I was going to say this or that, but has said she wants more time with one parent. And the judge had said, we're going to address that. And the kiddo won. She won that day. And it caught me off guard because I was like, CASA report, that's my report. So that was a win for me too. I cannot change what happened yesterday. I cannot control tomorrow. So what's important now? What can I do today? Being an advocate requires generosity, respect, action, compassion, energy, grace, GRACE, grace. In psychology, compassion is described as a deep awareness of another's suffering coupled with a desire and action to alleviate it. Compassion should be found in relationships, in leadership, and in society. Volunteering and advocating is an example of compassion. A CASA will gather, maintain, and recommend, gather information, maintain relationships, and make recommendations. Being a CASA is not just about time with the child. It is like micromanaging a bunch of different aspects. In both cases, it involves attending provider meetings, writing court reports, attending court, and perspective is an objective view. Throughout this process, I have continuously reminded myself, what is the perspective of this child? To make a difference in someone else's life, you just have to be there. That's a win. At the beginning, I shared that I became a CASA by asking myself, if not me, then who? So I hope you will leave thinking, if not you, then who? Thank you.
Thank you both to Marina and Meribeth and to all the CASAs. And obviously we don't bring in a child victim because that would be very difficult. So this just shows that we can bring in the voice of the child without having to traumatize them in something like this to bring awareness to everybody. So thank you both. And before I begin, a few words that I have prepared, I would like anybody who works at the Victim Witness Assistance Center to stand up and get recognized because you guys are the people. They might be next door setting up, but come on, I see a lot of you. Stand up and get recognized. I want to thank you all. Come on. Thank you. So this is just some of them. Some people are still in court, but I want to thank them because this is really why our center runs, is because of everybody who just stood up. So thank you all for all the hard work you do for us. I appreciate it. And so thank you all for being here today as we do recognize this year's Crime Victim Rights Awareness Month here in San Luis Obispo County. As you heard Marina say, the 2026 theme is Listen, Act, Advocate. It's simple, but it carries a profound responsibility for all of us. Each person impacted by crime has their own unique and very personal story. Unfortunately, that story does usually begin with fear and confusion, just as Marina had said as well, and it typically ends with silence. That is why listening is so important and is the first thing that a victim needs for all of us to do. Listening means more than just hearing the words and nodding our heads, which we do all the time at work. What it means is creating a space where victims can feel safe, where they're believed, and where they are also respected. Truly listening is setting aside our own personal thoughts, assumptions, and acknowledge their experiences, their pain, and their resilience. At the Christopher G. Money Victim Witness Assistance Center, listening is where every path to healing begins. It begins with us and ends with all of you in this room being a piece of the puzzle, helping, supporting, and really just being there for them, just as Meribeth has said as well. But listening is only the first step towards supporting our victims. Action is where compassion becomes tangible and starts to make a significant difference in the lives of all of our shared victim survivors. And we each have our own responsibility to act. In Victim Witness, we act by walking alongside a survivor through the court process, which is a very scary process for most people. The County Behavioral Health Department, Lumina Alliance, CAPSLO, TEMA, CASA, Center for Family Strengthening, and others act to provide items like counseling and peer support, which helps rebuild that sense of safety. The law enforcement officers, which there's many here today, so thank you for coming, do take action by taking the time, just as Chief Watkins was saying, to explain what comes next, because they are the first ones to provide victims of the Marcy's Rights cards, which we drop off to your offices all the time, and we know you're handing them out because we reorder all of the time. So thank you all for doing that, because that's very important. That is the Victim's Bill of Rights. And you guys send out other referrals as well. I know out in the field, law enforcement calls our office and says, what can I do with this person? How can we help them? So I really appreciate those phone calls, and I see the sheriff's office in the back, and thank you for your team that calls us all the time to make sure that your victims that you meet in the field get what they need, so thank you. Action ensures that victims are not left to navigate complex and confusing systems on their own, and it turns empathy into really meaningful support. its resources, and finally, justice. And last, but certainly not least, we must advocate. Advocacy is how we create lasting change for all of the victims, from 0 years old to 100 plus. It is how we ensure that victim rights are not just words on paper, but realities in our courts, in our actions, and within our communities. Advocacy means speaking up for those who may not have the strength or the platform to speak up for themselves. I see a victim survivor here in this room who does advocate, who has advocated, and has been on the steps of Sacramento to stand up for people like her. Advocacy is working together across county agencies, nonprofit organizations, and many disciplines to improve all of the policies, close those gaps that we often all see, and build a more educated and responsive, compassionate criminal and victim justice system. This is why our partnership with CASA, the Court Appointed Special Advocates, is so important. CASA volunteers, just as Marina had said, they do embody this theme every single day. They listen to children who have experienced abuse or neglect. They act by standing by them in court and in life. And they advocate tirelessly to ensure that each child's voice is heard and their best interests are there to protect. So thank you, Meribeth, because it sounds like you did that for that little girl. Together, we strengthen the safety net that every victim deserves. As we come together to support Crime Victim Rights Awareness Month and the education of victim rights, which is very important because a lot of victims don't know that they have that, we also need to remember that victims are not defined by what has happened to them. And a lot of times that's how they feel and how people see them, but they're not defined by that, and we do know that. They are defined by their strength, their courage, and most of all, their capacity to heal. And with us standing by them, that makes it a lot easier for them. Our role here in this room is to make sure that they never feel alone in that journey and are afforded the same dignity, respect, and consideration that the system does give to the offenders. So today and every day moving forward, I ask each of you to remember this year's theme. Listen with intention, act with purpose, and advocate with courage. Because when we do, we create a community where victims are not just acknowledged, but they're truly supported, empowered, and never forgotten. So thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Director Yates. So grateful to you for your leadership in our office, but also within our justice system and across our community. And Meribeth, I want to just say a special thank you to you for sharing with us the impact on the two young lives, but also the impact on you and how you've been able to receive back the gift of seeing progress and seeing wins for the children that you've been an advocate for. Thank you so much for that. And for those of you that were moved by the story of CASA, I truly hope that even if you're full-time employed, that you might consider finding out how you can be a CASA. What's your website, Marina? slowcasa.org. So check it out today, learn more, and find out how you can support. I want to just, before we go into the outer room here, there's a wonderful display of food. And for all of us, I want you all to please come. If you don't have much time, stop by, get some food. We don't want to have leftovers if possible, but come and get some food and take this as an opportunity to network with each other. Other providers, survivors of crime you may be able to speak with, other partners like restorative partners. I see Sister Teresa is here, and just so you know, one of the programs that Sister does is restorative justice, and what an incredible help that can be to help survivors of crime when restorative justice is done, and the offender and the victim can reconcile. Sometimes maybe it's not back together in a friendly relationship, being able to hear from each other, one, the impact of what the crime was on the survivor, but then for the survivor to be able to hear the unique story about that particular offender and hopefully hear from them regret and remorse and a turnaround. And so the healing that can happen that also recognizes that dignity that the victim needs can be incredible. But it's a piece that we don't do enough of in our community, but we're continually trying to offer that when both victim and offender are willing to participate. It's not something we can force, but when it happens, it really is a remarkable way to restore and bring healing to our community. A couple of people I want to recognize. let's see, Karen Borges, I don't know if I mentioned Lumina before, but thank you for being here always. We love our partnership with Lumina Alliance that assists victims of intimate partner violence and sexual assault throughout the community. I want to thank Sophie, who's here, who has done a lot of work and just recently come into our community to do work in the area of human trafficking. Matt Pontes, are you still here in the room? Our county CEO, I want to thank the county board and our CEO for their strong support of our criminal and victim justice system. So thank you, Matt, for being here. And I don't want to leave anybody out. So I want to just kind of close with an all-inclusive thank you to each and every one of you who are here. And I know we have representatives from our legislators. So you're here for Assemblywoman Dawn Addis, and forgive me, Jen, of course. Got too much going on here, but Jen, thank you, and thank the Assemblywoman. I saw her recently in Sacramento, and we find areas where we can focus on together. And a couple of years ago, she worked on a bill that reduced the statute of limitations in civil court for victims of sexual assault and child abuse. So we appreciate her commitment. And whenever we can find ways to advance the common goals of protection of victims and the safety of our community, we're very grateful. And I know, let's see, we've got our, what's that? I'm sorry. I can't. I'm sorry. I failed at reading minds, but Nate Paul from the Sheriff's Office, Chief Deputy, thank you very much for you and your whole team. And so anyway, we want to thank all of our partners. Tom Milder, I think, is back here. Chief from Grover Beach, Jim Monroe. Did I miss any other chiefs? No? Oh, you're hiding. Chief Rick Scott from San Luis Obispo Police Department, who was our speaker a couple of years ago. But finally, I just want to personally offer my deep gratitude to all of you who are here to support and recognize victims of crime in our community. I'd love to be able to eliminate crime and have it go away, but that's not going to happen. And so I'm proud of the hard work of our team and our collective community. And I'm going to close the meeting and invite you all, please join us, as I said, to get some food and enjoy each other's company just down the hall in the room next door. And finally, one more thing. These beautiful flowers were put together by Sherry Thompson, who works in our finance and accounting office. You know, every employee in our office, it doesn't matter if they're even the custodian, they're a part of our mission. They've signed on to our mission to protect our community by seeking justice and protecting the rights of crime victims. Sherry Thompson has done this now for several years, putting together these beautiful flower arrangements. Where are you, Sherry? She's over here, but thank you very much for doing that. All right. You are now dismissed. Thank you.